Welcome to Dodgers Daily. Casey Porter here. So glad that you decided to tune in. Fans, today we have a very, very, very special guest, Alex Freedman, the AAA play-by-play voice, director of broadcast communications, does a little bit of everything broadcasting-wise in the Oklahoma City area, joins Dodgers Daily for the third time. Alex, it's always an honor.
Absolutely, Casey. Always great to see and talk to you.
Okay, so first of all, you can take a big exhale. Of course, a couple of years ago, the Dodgers sold their share of the AAA club, and so you had to rebrand the name. It was the Oklahoma City Baseball Club for a year because of logistics, and then you finally got the final rebrand done. I'm sure you're excited. I'm sure you're exhaling, right?
Yeah, that exhale back in late October was certainly a large one. Of course, the work is still going on. You know, I've now gone through a couple rebrands in my tenure in Oklahoma City, which is not ideal, but they've happened for very specific circumstances. And, you know, you don't realize how many places your team name and your team logo is until you go through it. So, of course, there's still a lot being done at our ballpark and with our front office to fully transition. But, yes, it was definitely a big relief and a big weight off the shoulders once we were able to announce the name because, like you said, we had a very unique situation where we played under a temporary generic name for 1 year. So, of course, that only stirred up a lot of questions, a lot of interest before we were finally able to reveal it.
Yeah, so congratulations on it. The color schemes, the logos, the name that ties back into Mickey Mantle. I have probably 5 or 6 personal Mickey Mantle stories that tie him into everything baseball related in Oklahoma. So when I heard the tie was to Mickey Mantle, I just went through the roof. I was like, this is absolutely perfect. It's Mickey Mantle Drive that goes in front of the stadium. He has a restaurant across. I mean, Mickey Mantle is Oklahoma baseball. So kind of take us through coming up with the comments.
And not to mention the big statue in front of the third base gate as well, like you said, which is along South Mickey Mantle Drive. And I don't think the camera can see it, but I am wearing one of my
sweet
Comments logos. But yeah, it was a long process, and a lot of people ask, well, did you have fan input? And we did, in a sense, where we had it started, like you said, a couple years ago with focus groups with key stakeholders, community leaders, things of that nature, just gathering and not necessarily telling them what the purpose of it was, but to just kind of think and get their thoughts on, well, when you think of Oklahoma City, what do you think of? When you think of baseball in Oklahoma City, what do you think of? And that helped guide the process to start. I think one of the key pieces of information we got from those was fans wanted a more traditional name. And when I say traditional, I mean like one word, that's a plural.
Not sod poodles?
No. And hey, there's nothing wrong with those.
Sure, correct.
Of course, they've worked great in certain markets. I think we just learned that in Oklahoma City, it would not go over as well. So that certainly helped guide a lot of our thinking to begin with. And, there were certainly a lot of different brainstorming sessions and meetings that, I was a part of. I wasn't a part of all of them, but a lot of them. And eventually, we were just kind of talking around different names and some of the things that we thought of that kind of went into that was for me, my mind kind of went a little bit backwards when we were talking about, it's like, okay, well, we know we're going to be a Dodgers affiliate through at least 2030, hopefully longer than that.
Sure.
And how are ways that maybe we can pay homage to the Dodgers? So to have what are ways maybe we can play off the shooting ball or things like that? And so I threw it out kind of like, okay, what are the things that we can do that would incorporate that? And then that just kind of led to a conversation and furthermore, and we were kind of talking about, items that might bring that up. And then comments came up and it was like, okay, well, Mickey Mantle was the Commerce Comet. So I think it was just kind of a meeting of a lot of things kind of coming together at once that led us to that decision.
I got to ask you, was Johnny Bench ever a part of the equation? Was that ever in part of the meetings?
Not that I can remember.
Yeah. Awesome. So the name is fantastic. It ties back into Mickey Mantle, in my opinion, the most famous. And really, whenever he was still alive, he was the most active in terms of he would come to Oklahoma State games. He'd go to OU games. He came to Oklahoma City games. The most active in getting into the baseball community. So the name is awesome. the branding and logos, the colors are that you knocked it out. Kind of talk about that part of it.
Well, thank you very much. And I think you go into everything knowing that you're not going to have 100% approval rating.
Sure.
That's just the fact. And you know that most of the negative comments are going to be right at the start. Maybe it's because some might say I'm cynical. Some might say I'm just realistic. I thought the reaction would be mixed just because it typically is. And it was, but not to the extent I thought it was going to be.
Sure.
It was overwhelmingly positive.
Yes.
Pleasantly surprised, just in my personal opinion. Just because, like I said, I know the way that people are, the way that sports fans are, and how territorial they can be, and especially the comments on social media. But overwhelmingly positive. Of course, there's still naysayers out there who aren't going to like it, and that's what it is. But again, the percentage of people who have gotten on board with it have surpassed my expectations. You go back to our reveal event
Yes.
in late October, and I think, honestly, we were expecting 1,500, 2,000, and we had about 3,000 people there. And everybody there was just ecstatic when we played the video to finally reveal it. So it was a great night.
Yeah. So 89ers is a big popular name. It ties back into state history. I know that was a name that some people were maybe clamoring for. And then obviously that between the 89ers, when the AAA Oklahoma City baseball organization moved to Bricktown downtown, they changed away from the 89ers into the Red Hawks. So why not go into the past? I know that was a big part of it.
Absolutely. That was probably the biggest question or biggest piece of feedback that we got was bring back the 89ers. We just ultimately felt 89ers and All Sports Stadium were one of the same, and I understand why people want to bring it back, because those are the people who grew up going to All Sports Stadium as a kid and watching the 89ers. And now they're adults and have kids on their own and want to share that with them. But like I said, we felt that the 89ers were just kind of, we didn't necessarily want to add on to that chapter of history, that it was its own special history, again, being back at All Sports Stadium. And it's a special part of the past, and we certainly still celebrate it. And we're still going to have our 3 89ers nights throughout this coming season that are always popular. But we wanted to leave it like that.
Yeah, so the Marlboro Man, the hill down the left field line, the dot races, and it was the first time I ever had Dippin' Dots in my life.
Oh, wow.
All
I
there
didn't
at All
realize they were
Sports
around that long.
Yeah, man, first time ever. And then the 89ers, that is a part of the past that kind of like you're talking about, really cool for me. I'm 51, and that is my childhood. And it gets to continue to be a part of my childhood. It's memories now. Now we get to make new memories now, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you nailed just kind of a lot of the thinking that went behind it to begin with. And just one more, this is very a big tangent, but you mentioned Dippin' Dots. I have a little fun fact for you about Dippin' Dots that I like to share. Our ballpark does the most volume of Dippin' Dots than any other ballpark in the minor leagues.
Oh, really?
Total volume. Second in per capita behind Dayton, but total volume, we do the most among the 120 minor league teams.
Wow. Dayton's a high A affiliation. They play Great Lakes, who's the high A affiliates for the Dodgers, and they sell out like every game. I think they've sold out. So for Oklahoma City to sell more of anything than Dayton, that's very impressive.
Yeah. People love their Dippin' Dots here. What can I say? Yeah.
Well, it gets pretty hot, too.
Yes.
Awesome ballpark there. So, hey, I get to see it on not an everyday basis, but on a fairly close basis. You guys are so wonderful to me, allowing me to come and cover the Oklahoma City games. And then also Coach Barakoff, I'm friends with him, and I know he is a head coach at Oklahoma City University, and you do some of the senior athletic games as a play-by-play guy. So you're forever busy. So kind of take us through maybe the daily routine and the yearly routine for somebody who's the director of broadcast communications for a AAA club. Saw
Coach Barakoff yesterday.
Yeah.
It's his team. Was playing the school I usually broadcast for, Mid-America Christian. For those who don't know, it's located in South Oklahoma City. Unfortunately, Coach Barakoff, his team's been hit by the flu bug pretty hard lately, so they're struggling a little bit. But once they get healthy, they'll have a big push here down the end. But yeah, right now in the off season, it really is kind of almost two kind of separate different segments from when the season ends to the end of the calendar year. It is a little bit slower. Of course, things are a little bit different with regards to the rebrand and all that. But man, I don't know how to explain it, but that first day back after Christmas and New Year's, that's when everything starts to become real. And, right now we're working on things like the media guide, all our preseason events and our preseason communications. We have various different annual events that we do leading up to the season, such as our Fan Fest, which will take place in mid-March. We've got our job fair because our game day employees are so critical to our operation. That will be coming up in late February. We just announced our promo schedule. So, my department, which consists of me and one other person, we're responsible for the external communications in that regard, in terms of, press releases, what you see on the website and all that stuff. Of course, we have a whole separate marketing department and ticketing, of course, that will really get into the weeds of that kind of stuff. But planning out our various and then executing our different kind of external communications. As soon as we get closer and closer to the season, we'll have more media out to kind of help preview the season and talk about everything that they can expect coming up to Chickasaw Bricktown Ballpark. So a lot of it's outreach to do that, to get some more exposure, to promote the team in the coming season. From a baseball information side, working on our media guide, which is a big undertaking every single year. Working on, of course, one of the other press releases we'll eventually have is about our coaching staff. And what I like to tell people also is press releases are not just press releases these days. It requires a lot of coordination. You have corresponding graphics, not only for social media, for the website, and all that stuff. So there's a lot that goes into it. I wouldn't call it hard, but it does take up a lot of time. So executing our external communications leading up to the season. Of course, the roster is a little bit of a guessing game, and we work from just kind of a pool that I put together of people that we can expect to have here. And of course, it's going to be much larger. It's always much larger than the 26 or 28 active players you'll always have. So doing all that stuff, and like you said, right now I do a lot of freelance college basketball work. And because it's the Sooner Athletic Conference, NAIA conference, and really any conference that's not NCAA Division I for basketball, in conference play, the men's and women's teams play back-to-back in conference games. So you're always doing 2 games on one night. And I only do the home games, but it's still a lot. And MACU just went through a stretch where it was 4 different doubleheaders in 8 days from last Saturday to this Saturday. One of which was because they had a game that was supposed to be on the road, but the school had water damage to its gym, so it got moved to MACU. So you're doing all that on top of your full-time job as well. Yeah. So it was it definitely could be a busy stretch from time to time. During the season, gosh, it's people ask me how I do it, and I just say you just do it.
Yeah.
And it starts with our daily game notes, which is a good 4-hour process at least every single day. We've thought of ways that but we can make our life easier in that regard this year, maybe cutting down on some things that don't necessarily have to be in it every single day. But my thing is, of course, I want to produce things of the highest quality content that we can. So you do all that. Typically if we're at home, I'll work from home in the morning and get to the ballpark in the early afternoon. When we're on the road, you're working from the hotel during the day, and then you get to the ballpark 2-3 o'clock, to a typical night game. Definitely no later than 3. That would be the absolute latest. And then you're prepping for the broadcast and writing everything down in my book, getting it the way that you want to. There's the various pregame stuff. Some days I record an interview with a player or coach. I'm editing that interview. I'm editing highlights from the night before for the broadcast. And then just, again, getting everything set the way you want it to. Hopefully about an hour before the game starts is when I like to say pencils down, just try and shut it down for a little bit, get something to eat. And before you go on the air, which is 15 minutes before the game. And then you have the game itself, which you just never know how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Then post-game, there's post-game recaps that myself or my coworker Lisa Johnson will write. And again, you're not just writing it, then you're finding a picture to go along with the story. You're putting it on the website. You're putting it on social media. So they're definitely long days. Typically, the work starts, we'll just say for a night game, absolutely no later than 9 a.m. And then you're done typically around 11:30. So it's a lot of work, but a lot of fun, as I like to say. And of course, anytime we get interview requests, photo requests, we help facilitate that stuff. Whether it's for a player or coach, or whether it's for general interest story in our team and front office and operation. And you just have various things that come your way every day. Of course, you have a rehabber. There's going to be more media attention. That requires more credentialing and creating space in our press box, and sometimes putting people in the suite next to the main press box because we need to have more space. So it's a lot of different small, I hate to use the term fires, but small things that you just never know that come up. Like from a ticketing and operations side, you always know Fridays and Saturdays are going to be the biggest days. For us, you have no idea. It could be a Tuesday, it could be a random Thursday in July. You just never know. It depends on what's happening that day, and there are just some days where people just randomly contact me wanting to talk to this person or that person and all that stuff. So I always forget a lot of the things that go on during the season and the things that I'm responsible for when talking about it. But again, a lot of work, but a lot of fun.
Then you got to tie into the community. You got to do all your speeches with everybody to try to get people to the games and all that. So it is never ending. Hey, you mentioned Lisa Johnson. She is part of the staff there, does a wonderful job. We've mentioned Coach Barakoff. Can you kind of take us behind the scenes as far as what it takes to get all of the broadcast done, the information on the scoreboard, the video, all that, what it takes to get a AAA game done?
So basically the press box is divided into two halves. In our half, where our department is responsible for overseeing the official score, what's called the data stringer, which is the live stats for Major League Baseball advanced media. What's the boss operator, which is kind of supplemental to the data stringer, and then the field timing coordinator, which is the fancy title for the pitch clock guy.
Yeah.
So we're responsible for staffing those four positions every home game. Then there's what's called the ABS tech, which assists the umpires and all the technology with the automated strike zone. Now, we don't hire or schedule them. That's all done by Major League Baseball. But nobody from Major League Baseball is there at our ballpark during the game. So we're like the liaison to them as well. If something goes wrong, Lisa's usually the one helping them figure it out. So I like to say it's actually 4.5 game day employees that we kind of have. And then the other half of the press box is all the production side, which is overseen by our game entertainment video production people. That's all what you mentioned, what goes on the scoreboard, what happens in between innings, the music, the PA, all that stuff. We have our own in-house broadcast. It's 5 different cameras that we have. We have our own director, producer. That's what gets shown on the MiLB TV feed. That's what gets shown on the monitors inside the ballpark. They're the ones creating the graphics for the score bug and the players when they come up to the plate and all that stuff. So, it is a big production every single day. And what we do in the press box, like I kind of referenced earlier, is just such a small fraction of everything that takes place at the ballpark on a game day between our customer and service employees, our food and beverage employees. Busy nights, we'll have 100 game day employees there in various departments. So, it's definitely a big production, even for say, just a AAA baseball game.
And so you got here right after the Rangers had moved their AAA affiliate back to Texas. We became the Houston Astros AAA affiliate. AAA baseball goes all the way back to 1962. When I was a kid, we were the Phillies, and I actually got to meet Pete Rose. They would come and play at All Sports Stadium. I actually got to sit in the dugout with those guys, Tug McGraw. Named my first dog after Tug McGraw because I got to talk to him for about a half an hour in the dugout at the All Sports Stadium. But anyways, I say all that to say, now we're the Dodgers. We've been the Dodgers for almost a decade. So do you see any difference between the way the Dodgers maybe treat their AAA or their minor league affiliates that make it better than other places, or it's just kind of all the same to you?
I think everybody has caught up to the Dodgers in a sense. When they first came in 2015, they were doing things in their minor league system that nobody else was doing. They had us set up a whole video room in the clubhouse, which was present in the major leagues. Nobody in the minors really had that. They were catering meals. They were not, it used to be the clubhouse manager that basically cooked for players, and they cooked whatever. They're not chefs by trade, but they were catering. They were making sure they were using higher quality ingredients from those purveyors. And it was kind of a joke, really, among other teams, like, oh, look what the Dodgers are doing. Look what Gabe Kapler, who was the farm director at the time, look what he's doing. And now look what everybody else is doing. They're doing the exact same thing. So the Dodgers were definitely ahead of the curve when it came to player development side. And that's the thing that I wouldn't say it bothers me, but of course, when the Dodgers get talked about with their major league payroll, and it is big, there's no denying that. But they're not just spending on major league payroll. They are spending and putting a lot of resources into their player development system as well. And you see it with the players who come up and are part of the big league team. So I think, like I said, the Dodgers were definitely ahead of the curve. And this is not to disparage the Astros in any way, but it was just vastly different, that change from the 2014 season to the 2015 season, where we had, like, I remember there was a video intern, and this guy literally just sometimes when the pitching coach or hitting coach would request it, like, went out there with a handheld camera in BP or a bullpen session to record stuff. And, you know, again, it was just kind of the typical setup before where, you know, the clubhouse meals were cooked by the clubby, a lot of cold cuts, a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for guys who were going back and forth between the big leagues a lot of the time. So it was, again, that's not to disparage the Astros. That's just how it was anywhere you went with any team, really. So the Dodgers, like I said, it was a big change that first year. And, you know, you also were going from a Astros franchise that was rebuilding in the depths of despair, multiple 100-loss seasons. We saw a lot of talent come through Oklahoma City that ended up leading the Astros to World Series, 7 straight league championship series appearances. So there's a lot of attention on those teams because this was the future for Houston. But there's always been a lot of attention on us as a Dodgers Philly, just because it's also the Dodgers. And especially the last few years when you've seen the players who are constantly going back and forth and knowing that, well, this guy's probably going to come up at some point to make a spot start. Who's the next guy that comes up and makes an impact on the team? And who's that guy that before the season starts is nowhere to even be found on the depth chart? It ends up making an impact in the big leagues. So, you know, it's certainly different where people ask me what some of my favorite parts of the job is, and just being in the Dodgers organization truly is one of the best parts of this job. Not only the success of the big league level and how much our players have gone on to contribute to that, but the type of people that they bring in, both from a player standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, player development. I mean, everyone you come across are just tremendous people too, and it makes the job very enjoyable.
You get to spend 6 months around these guys, and so you get pretty attached to Landon Knacks and the Ben Kaspariuses, and then also the Major League veterans that are trying to reclaim their careers. But let's back up to some of the younger guys. So here you are, you're talking to them in a AAA dugout, and they're wondering when, if ever, they're going to get their Major League opportunity. Then all of a sudden you turn on the TV, and they're pitching in the World Series. What's that like for you, knowing that you have such a personal relationship with them?
People ask me, so I grew up, for a little context, like I grew up in St. Louis, grew up a Cardinals fan. People ask me, are you still a Cardinals fan? I say no, you know, they're just another team to me now. When you work in this business, you know, it just changes your view of things. And I say you become a fan of people more than teams. And those guys that you mentioned, we were all hanging out at Buc-ee's together on a bus trip back from Round Rock after a day game. You know, it's stuff like that. They're the ones that you know, when we get stranded in the Denver airport, you know, that you're with, and they're part of the games that you see in the life that you lead. And you know, you just can't help but be happy and root for them. And, you know, just knowing that they have a chance to seize a really big opportunity. You know, you obviously, like I said, you just root for these guys, and And of course, you're hoping that it's going to help the Dodgers achieve their ultimate goal, which it did. So that just makes it even better. So again, it's just, and like I said before in the previous thing we talked about, just the quality of people makes it really easy to root for them as well.
So the Jesse Hahns, the Dinelson Lamettes, the Nabil Creasmots, the Matt Davisons, the guys who have major league experience, they're at AAA. They've come to the Dodgers for the developmental system, and they're trying to have that one last shot to major leagues. What's it like getting to work with those kind of guys?
Well, they set the standard for a lot of different guys as well. You know, you see why these guys have been in the big leagues before, the way they go about their business, their work ethics. And they also, I think, to a man, realize that, hey, I was on the other side of this before. I want to help the people who now come after me, like the people who were before me help me. And they're always great people to have around the clubhouse, around the team. You know, that's the unfortunate thing that happened with the change in the minor leagues with player caps, that you don't sign as many minor league veteran free agents as you once did. And that's the unfortunate reality of the situation, that where AAA rosters used to be populated with a lot of guys like that. And now there's only a handful. Yeah, you just really go to you appreciate those guys. And it's like, the best way I can describe it is they're guys who get it. Like I said, the way they go about doing their things, I think that's kind of a misnomer, which is, especially from when I started, that those older guys who have big league time are trying to get back would be these salty veterans, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You know, they're all just pros, and they go about their business. And a lot of guys come to the Dodgers organization because they say, hey, even if I don't get up with the Dodgers, they're going to make me better.
Yes, right.
And they're very aware of that. And a lot of these guys also know that they're also showcasing themselves for 29 other organizations. So between all that, you know, like I said, they're just great to have. The Dodgers, they do an outstanding job of targeting those guys and how they're going to fit and how they're going to add to the team, both on and off the field, and bring them in. So always a pleasure to be around them.
So the Dodgers make a whole bunch of different transactions, more than any other club typically than in baseball. And so here you are, a AAA broadcaster who has to deal with a rotating roster to begin with, and then you're dealing with an organization that makes so many transactions, and you're the type of broadcaster that likes to be over-prepared. So how does that dynamic work for you?
It's not always ideal, but, you know, you just rely on your different sources, your research that you have, not only from a number standpoint, but reaching out to people from the other affiliates who might know them. You ask the coaches. Some of these guys, of course, cross over in spring training, or you ask guys that, hey, they played with them earlier this year in Tulsa or Great Lakes, and what they've got on them and all that stuff. So, but sometimes you just go into it and it's like, it is what it is. I mean, right after the trade deadline this year, we first played we played the game that night in El Paso on deadline day with 9 position players.
Yeah.
Then just kind of as a stopgap, the Dodgers sent us a couple of kids, literal kids, you know, from the Arizona Complex League, just to be there as bodies, because, you know, the trades that the Dodgers made eventually were going to result in guys getting optioned to us, and there's a few different things going on. And, you know, you're having 18-year-old kids. I remember, I think his name was Eduardo Guerrero, who did get a start in one of the games. He's never played in a stadium with fans. He's never played in a stadium with a second deck before. And he's barely started his professional career. And I think that's part of the thing that you also weave into the story of the broadcast as well. So maybe what you don't know about that person, you can rely and of course, catch people up on the uniqueness of the situation. So there are always inevitably going to be times where you're just not going to have a lot of information on a guy, and the English might not be their first language, and you can't really communicate with them all that great. But, you know, you just find ways around it.
Yeah, so being a AAA broadcaster, of course, winning's important anytime that you keep score. If you have a scoreboard, winning matters. But as a 3-hour, maybe 3.5-hour broadcast, 6 months every day, other than Mondays, there's a lot of time to tell stories. So What's the balance for you in terms of the time on the broadcast that you like to tell these guys' journeys versus actually describing the game?
To me, what's happening in the game is always the most important thing, and that has to be paramount. You don't ever want to shoehorn in a story when the bases are loaded with one out in like a one-run game in the eighth inning. You know, for me, it's all about what is the situation happening. It's finding the right time, and you're going to learn certain things at certain times, and you might hear a story in BP or in the clubhouse that you know is good, but you also need to wait for the right time for it. It might not come up that night, and I'm not going to be the one who forces that in. So to me, it's always, of course, like I said, the what's going on in the game at that time is the most important thing to me. And some people might like it, some people might not. I view it as if I'm turning on the game, this is what I want to know. Yeah. Another thing that I struggle with is like, okay, well, you tend to focus a lot of the background and the story at the beginning of the year when guys are new, people are learning them for the first time, and then it kind of fades off. And I struggle with, okay, even though it's July and this guy's played close to 100 games with the team, there are some people who might not know that.
Yeah.
So even though it might be repetitive to you and some other people that you probably should do that, like I said, I struggle with that. I probably need to do a better job of inserting maybe certain things. Of course, you're not saying it every single day, but after significant time has passed, because you can't assume that everybody knows everything.
Sure.
Just because you talked about it in April doesn't mean they know about it in July, even if it is the same player. So I think because baseball is so long, and for us, you have 150 games, that some things bear worth repeating. And, of course, I think myself and the players, coaches, we all realize we certainly don't have it figured out, not even close to having it all figured out. We're all striving to get better in our personal careers. So, there's certain things that you go back and as much as it pains you to listen to yourself, that you kind of have to do it to find ways to get better. So, I think it's, to answer the question again very succinctly, what's happening in the game is the most important thing, and it's just kind of a feel of when you work in those different type of stories. And the pregame show, when we have interviews, I know a lot of people don't listen to them all the time, but I think that's a good place to hear the guys in their own words as well. And usually if they tell a good story that was in that pregame segment today, I'll relay it. I'll say, hey, in case you weren't with us today on the pregame show, so-and-so talked about this or that. And so it's a good way to work it in as well.
Yeah. You mentioned having sources, and you are definitely one of the big sources for some of the broadcasters at the major league level, right? So they come down to you for maybe some information on a guy, you give them the information, maybe you give them a story, and then you turn on the World Series or you turn on a playoff game or just even a regular season game, and you hear them telling the story that you gave them. Is that a cool experience for you?
I guess, it's just, I view it as I'd want them to do the same if the things were reversed. And I know what it's like when a guy comes up and you have nothing on them and they're on a much bigger stage and audience than I am. And if there's just a little small thing I can do to help, I will. There have been times I've gotten questions and I can't help all that much. And that's just the reality of the situation. It's not that I'm not doing my job. It's just different circumstances. So you just try and help as much as you can. We try and provide as much information that we can. all those guys who work on the Dodgers broadcasting, they get our daily emails with game notes and recaps and all that stuff. And, they know how to contact me. It's not like it's an everyday occurrence. I don't want it to seem like that, but especially when a guy gets called up for the first time. And like I referenced earlier, there was someone who wasn't even on the radar before the season started. It might not have even pitched in a Cactus League game in spring training. That's when you tend to get the questions and all of that. So, it's just if I can contribute a very, very, very small part, I'm happy to do it.
Let's talk about some of the players. I'm going to give the first player we're talking about his own time because he's deserved it. Maybe the best player in the history of the franchise of Oklahoma City that dates back to 1962. And I don't think that's an exaggeration to at least say one of the best players. Drew Avens. Of course, he became a free agent, signed with the A's, but how awesome has he been?
Drew is just a player that you love to watch on an everyday basis. You root for him. You want to see him to get to the big leagues so bad. I think the way that our manager, Travis Barbary, said it a couple of years ago to me that was the best is he's probably about 20 to 30 years behind the time of baseball, which, again, and by no means is an insult to Drew or anything, but just the way that the game is viewed through a different lens, where the contact, the on base, the speed maybe isn't as highly valued as it once was. But this is a guy who's our leadoff hitter for almost every single game for 3 straight years out of the 4 years he was with Oklahoma City. And that first year back in 2021 was kind of more of a part-time player, but always had an impact on the game, when he played. And I understand that in a sense, AAA career records is a little bit of a dubious distinction because it means you were there for a long time, but it still also means you're a really, really good player. And, for Drew, you root, like I said, you root for him so hard. There are so many times when it looked like, okay, this might be the one that gets him up there, and it just never worked out for him. But, just came to the ballpark, and you were gonna get from him every single day. And to have him get the hits record, the runs record, the walks record, just speaks to the kind of player that he is. And you hear the importance of guys having to go up and post. He did that, and had a 50-game on-base streak a couple years ago that only came to an end because he ran full speed trying to make a catch into a wall and suffered a concussion after, I think it was 2 plate appearances.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Game. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I did not realize that. Wow.
Yeah, it was in Sugar Land, yeah.
Wow.
Sprinting full speed at the center field wall, banged in the wall, and had to come out of the game like in the 3rd or 4th inning. So that's what ended his 50-game on-base streak back then. So great defender, great arm. And I think you knew this coming as this year was winding down, that the odds of him, either the Dodgers wanting to re-sign him or him wanting to re-sign with the Dodgers, were pretty slim, just because when you put up pretty good numbers for that time in AAA and you don't get a shot, obviously you want to try and find a place where that might be a better opportunity for you. So wishing him nothing but the best with Oakland, or the Athletics.
Yeah.
I hope I don't see him when we play Las Vegas, but
right.
I know they've beefed things up a little bit more now too, so maybe a little bit more difficult to crack that big league roster. But yeah, of course, you're rooting for him, you're pulling for him, hoping that he'll thrive, and we'll certainly miss him as well.
Yeah, you got to pitch there quite a bit at Southeastern Louisiana. Got to pitch some, at least a little bit, for AAA Oklahoma City. Had that good little left-handed changeup, so that was fun. Some of the underrated, the radar guys, which I'm sure I know I end up rooting very hard for, because you just see their journey and it's like, man, I want this guy to make the major leagues. But like Hunter Fiducia, of course, he has made the major leagues, but still not extended time. Cody Hosey, Ryan Ward, who has just torn it up this offseason, and then Alec Gamboa, who's been a lifetime Dodgers fan, done a great job at every level of the minor leagues. So talk about those guys.
Yeah, I'll start with Hunter Fiducia, a guy who just has improved by leaps and bounds since he was drafted, and by his own admission, a late bloomer, even as an amateur. You ask him how he became a catcher to begin with. He said, it's because I was a fat kid. That's where they put me behind the plate. Then go to junior college, then go to the pressure cooker at LSU, and, then be it, I believe, 12th round pick, and again, just get better and better and better as his time goes on, and played his way, deservingly so, onto the 40-man roster, and eventually making his big league debut this past year. So a quiet guy who has started to come out of his shell slowly but surely, the last few years. But yeah, just a great guy to be around, and what you're, like I said, when we were talking about Drew Avens, what you're going to get from him every day that he's in the lineup, and when he shows up to the ballpark. Cody Hosey, a guy who was a struggle for a lot of his career, and And I don't know personally how much the weight and the pressure of being a first-round pick, can weigh on him. And I think naturally it's going to have an effect on somebody. But talking with Cody, felt like the end of 2023 in Tulsa was when things really started to click. And you come to AAA, and it's like, okay, well, you just kind of look at the body of work overall. And he did have a good spring training last year, but it's spring training too. And start to finish, he just had an incredible season, never really slowed down. He showed a lot more power than he had in the past. He played an outstanding third base. Likely will be back with us, start this season as well. And again, we just talk about the player improvement the Dodgers tend to get out of guys, and he's certainly one of them. Sometimes it takes a while for it to all click. Ryan Ward, I mean, gosh, it's another guy that, again, just so easy to root for.
Yes.
Small school guy, senior sign. Before he got to Oklahoma City, was just automatic at the lower levels of the minor leagues, putting up 20, 25 plus home runs. This year eclipsed 30. And you also hear about the other strides he's made from our bench coach, Chris Gutierrez. His defense is improved by leaps and bounds in the outfield. And it can also fill in and play decent first base for you too. And he's not when you look at him, he's not physically that prototypical huge masher, but that's how he kind of profiles in terms of what he does at the plate. And then to see him have a chance in Premier 12 with Team USA and hit a huge home run in the Tokyo Dome. And, just such a humble guy as well. Small town Massachusetts guy who in the off season will help his dad work at the city parks. Yep. Just another guy that, again, just such a down to earth guy and so easy to root for. And, hopefully his chance at some point comes this year. Alec Gamboa, man, where would this team have been last year without Alec Gamboa? Filling in as a starter and doing extremely well. And, by his own admission, I don't have the best stuff. That's like, hey, at least when I know I'm starting and I have multiple innings, I know I have time to figure it out. And I know it caught up to him a little bit at the end of the year, and I was a little disappointed to see him not get a big league invite to spring training. I don't know. I know he was hurt at the end of the year. I don't know where he currently is at with that, but gosh, again, he was just a huge bacon saver for Oklahoma City this past year, the way he was able to step up in a role he hadn't been in a couple of years and always provide, quality stuff out there on the mound. And not trying to be someone he isn't, especially in this day in the high velocity, high strikeout. You have to miss bats. He's like, hey, this is what I know works for me. And, he was really good. And like I said, just an unsung hero of this past year's team.
James Outman's been a little bit of a lightning rod because he had the just incredible first season where he became the second place of the Rookie of the Year, 4-WAR type of guy. Then struggled in his 120 or so at-bats last year at the major league level, came back down to Oklahoma City, did his work, became a AAA All-Star. Can you talk about his process and just how great of a player he has been? I know the jump from AAA to major leagues has never been any bigger than it is right now, but the type of player he's been for Oklahoma City.
The saying now goes that, and this is not specific to James, but what you mentioned reminded me that the saying of it's never been easier to get to the big leagues. And easier is a very relative term. I don't want to make it seem that anybody can do it, but it's never been harder to stay. Right. And I think that is completely true, especially on the pitching side, but of course on the position player side as well. But James, gosh, you see him in 2022, and we talk about players improving and their time in the Dodgers organization. And, the well-known quote that he's shown before, when I first got into pro ball, I swung like a caveman.
Yeah.
And he was just a treasure trove of tools, but not a great baseball player, right. When he first came into pro ball. And boy, the way that he improved, and again, like Hunter Fiducia, played his way onto the 40-man roster, played his way into his big league debut. has a great first season, but then just did not, unfortunately, come together for him in the big leagues last year. And, when you're the Dodgers and you're competing for World Series, it's not like it is for a rebuilding team where that leash is going to be a little bit longer, that they need people who are going to consistently produce for them on an everyday basis. To James's credit, though, never once pouted. I remember when he got sent down, we had Chris Woodward with us, who had been a special assistant the last couple of years, former Rangers manager, now is going to be the Dodgers first base coach, and talking to him, and he's like, James Outman came down here with his mission right away to be, how am I going to become a better big league ball player?
Yeah.
Never any pouting, whining, went out there and was trying to improve. And there's so many stuff that even I, with access to the team, I don't see every day. And the average person certainly does not see every day, and how much time these guys put in to getting their bodies right, to working in the cage, working behind the scenes, reviewing video, different analytics stuff. The care factor is always through the roof. And the tools, of course, for James, they're all still there. I'm not smart enough to tell you what he needs to do to become a more consistent big leaguer, where it went wrong necessarily this past season. And I know his name now is being bandied about quite a bit in potential trades.
Sure.
But again, this is a guy whose tools are again, they're all very high. Mm-hmm. And the person, the character is all very high as well. And it's a guy that, again, you root for, you'd like to bet on as well. And hopefully that, figure some things out this offseason and can get back to the guy that we saw in the big leagues in 2023.
Learned how to bunt last year, too. Laid down some sweet bunts, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Teams would still shift him as much as they could, and third baseman would play back. And on multiple occasions, he put down a bunt. He's an outstanding runner.
Yeah.
So as long as he's able to get it down, he's more likely, than not gonna be able to beat it out. And the defense is still incredible. I mean, last game of the year, teams they're not going to go to the playoffs. We're in Salt Lake. It's the final game of that ballpark. They've got over 14,000 people there. 2-run game, I believe. Guy hits a ball to right center. I mean, lays out, makes an absolute tremendous catch. And I don't want to call it a meaningless game, but a lower stakes game. And that just shows you what you need to know about James Outman.
Yeah. And then two of the more highly rated prospects, Dalton Rushing and Alex Freeland. I know they're very exciting. You got to see all of the left field innings for Dalton Rushing. But what did you think about those two? Pretty exciting with the buzz around them, right?
Yeah, especially for Alex. In a sense, you kind of wish the season kept going, because he was really starting to figure it out there in the last couple of weeks. And it got off to a rough start for him at AAA, which, hey, he's not the first one that's happened to. He certainly is not going to be the last one.
Walker Buehler.
Yeah, but again, such high tools there. The switch hitting ability, the defense, the arm. I mean, he made a Derek Jeter-like play in a game in Round Rock where it was close late, the hole at shortstop. Another good kid, young kid. He was draft eligible sophomore when he got drafted just a couple of years ago. We didn't really get to see the speed as much. He has stolen base ability, and I don't know if it was just because he was still feeling things out, or maybe he wasn't just getting on base a ton at first with us, but we didn't get to see that side of him. But again, got to see a lot of different tools from Alex, and looking forward to what he's going to have, with us this year, which more than likely than not, of course, he'll be with us to start the year. And then Dalton Rushing, of course, we all know about the hitting. And I remember he comes up, we still have Hunter Fiducian, Diego Cartaya on the roster. Yeah. And I asked Travis, I'm like, how is this going to work? He's like, well, he's only playing left field. What?
Yeah, right.
I know it had happened a handful of times in Tulsa. And he goes out there, and you're thinking, I'll see. He was you would have never known from the start, when him being out there in left field. Of course, the arm of the catcher, it's going to play well out there. But it's a guy who's, I think, more athletic than you might think overall. And he again, I'm not a scout. I'm not an expert by any means, but he looked the part out there in left field, when he went out there. And then things changed. It's like, hey, we need him to start catching a little bit again, too. And I couldn't tell that he hadn't caught in 3 weeks or anything like that. Of course, I'm sure there were little things that happened that are naturally going to happen in a situation like that. But and of course, the reason you show up to watch Dalton is what he does in the batter's box, and again, just a lot of potential there. The patience, high on base guy, high power guy, big time competitor out there as well. Wants to win every single pitch, every single at bat. Which is so funny because as soon as he steps out of those white lines, he's like the sweetest kid ever. So, he's again, we'll see what the future has in store for him. It'll be interesting to see what that playing time is like if he ends up in Oklahoma City positional wise, what the Dodgers ultimately want to do. And you figure if, Will Smith and Austin Barnes, there are no injuries there that both Hunter Fiducia, Dalton Rushing, and Chris Oakey, who they recently brought back, or will all be with Oklahoma City, barring any other moves or injuries or anything like that. So that'll certainly be interesting to see, what they want to do with Rushing. And I know he's played a little first base in the past as well. Hasn't been playing any first base with us last year. So we'll see. That'll definitely be a fun thing to watch.
Fiducia had the gig last year. He would catch on Saturdays, not on Sundays, and then he had the off day on Mondays. That was a sweet gig, wasn't
it? Yeah, absolutely.
Walker Buehler, we got to see him quite a bit. Was there anything that he did? And then, of course, he got the last 3 outs. We got to see him in Oklahoma City struggle like crazy. I mean, and it was visible to him. He was pissed every time that he pitched in Oklahoma City because he wasn't happy with the way it was going. So you see this in front of 3,000 people or 4,000, 5,000 people in a AAA facility on a Sunday afternoon, right? Then you see him get the last 3 outs of the World Series and be a totally different pitcher. Anything surprise you there?
I'll go back to a quote that Jamie Wright shared with me. Jamie, longtime big league pitcher, was our pitching coach 2021, now is roving pitching instructor. And he said, the amount of time you're out with injury, it's going to take at least that amount of time to get back to where you were.
Oh, nice.
Walker was out 1.5 years. And he did come a little bit. Again, we saw him for 2 innings with us, September 2023, retired all 6 batters he faced, but physically just didn't respond well to it. And I think we just saw that this was going to be a process. And, you've heard all. Walker knows who he is. He's very self-aware. He has said, I sucked. Not only are you getting, obviously, your stuff back, but the different mechanics. And there are so many things that you or I or the average person can't see, but they know that it's just so close to being fixed, and he's brought up in his interviews and, okay, how did it all come together for you in the postseason? So there's just a little thing where we were finally getting the back leg synced with everything else that the way it needed to work. And a guy who, by his own admission, says when the lights are brighter, it helps him. And, it's hard for us maybe to understand that, okay, well, why can't you perform well in it, like you said, on a Wednesday night in Oklahoma City when there's 2,000 people in the stands, but when you've pitched in the World Series and you get that natural adrenaline, it is different. It is different. And the guys are, of course, the results might have been there, but gosh, those guys are still trying their butts off. They want to figure it out worse than anybody else. So, yeah, like you said, there were times where we saw flashes of it as rehab with Oklahoma City. But again, it was just also knowing that this was someone who was out for 1.5 years after undergoing his second Tommy John surgery of his career. And nobody was, again, I just would always emphasize on the broadcast, no one wants to figure this out more than Walker Buehler. And he figured it out at the very right time. And not only the World Series, but just also throughout the entire playoffs, really. And he had one bad inning, which in San Diego, which he wasn't wasn't really all that at fault for. There's a lot of bad defense behind it. Outside of that, he was, outstanding, and would just go out there and put up zeros. And of course, about everyone now knows about the World Series and getting the final 3 outs when the Dodgers had nobody left. And and I loved what he said on Mookie Betts' podcast, was like, I was the best prepared to lose that game. I was the best prepared to lose that game. Of course, he didn't want to.
Sure.
But he's like, I knew that I was the best to handle it because I hadn't been very good all year. And it would have been easy to point at me and not anybody else. And I think that says a lot about, of who he is. And another guy, you wish him the best in Boston, and hopefully he'll get back to, some of that all-star seasons.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk to Jamie a couple times. Jamie Wright, he was actually a year older than me, went to Westmore there in the Oklahoma City area. We didn't get to play each other in high school because Stillwater was in the league there in Tulsa, but knew all about him. He was an incredible player there at Westmore. He was absolutely amazing. So the young pitching like Landon Knack, Bobby Miller, Ben Kasparius, we've seen a little bit of Nick Frasso, AAA Oklahoma City, Kyle Hurt, Emmett Sheehan, all those guys. What are your impressions of them?
Well, they all got to the big leagues for a reason, that's for sure. But there's also a common thread for most of them as well, is the injuries. And I know that's something the Dodgers are trying to figure out, and what exactly is happening. Of course, we've seen it across baseball, but especially, in the Dodgers organization. And, hopefully those guys can get back, and we'll probably see Emmett at some point this year. We'll probably see Nick at some point this year. The Kyle sounds like it's probably doubtful. And Landon is stayed healthy for the most part. And again, another guy who, like we said, Alec Gamboa for Oklahoma City, bacon saver for the Los Angeles Dodgers at points this year. And again, a guy who's not maybe going to wow you with the stuff, but the pitch ability, and I think he's really learning. It's hard because of course the guys in the big leagues are such a different caliber than they are at AAA. Everyone's still really good, but it's just another level. And when you're also going back and forth, it kind of doesn't let you figure it out as much as well. And certain things you're doing at AAA, you do in the big leagues, they don't work. Certain things you do in the big leagues, you try and do in AAA, and it might not be the best thing to do. So I don't envy those guys. It's also very hard to get on a routine. And I know we're kind of shifting away from what was typically for years and years known as the 5-day routines, now more like a 6-day routine. But these guys can't get in any kind of routine when you're just constantly going back and forth, or there's times where it's like you think you're going to pitch for Oklahoma City, but then the front office calls the coaching staff a day before or the day of being like, no, we might need him. And again, it's not always because they are going to go up. It's because they might go up. And, Landon was certainly in the middle of that, maybe more than anybody this past year. And I don't think it's appreciated, like I said, how hard it is for a guy who's in that position to get into a routine, either at AAA or in the big leagues. And then when you still walk out there, be expected to perform at a high level. So those guys, of course, they do the best job that they can, given those circumstances. And Ben Kasparius, boy, you look at the season he had, and there was a reason he was on those prospect lists, but it's like, is he going to throw strikes?
Yeah, right.
And he found a way to be more in the zone this year, and I think more trust his stuff in the zone this year. And this is a guy who still is relatively new to just being a full-time pitcher also, that I think gets a little bit forgotten at the same time. And I think a theme that when we've highlighted certain players today is that the through line is it is a process.
It is.
These are guys who are getting better and better as the year goes on, or the years go on. And it speaks to the Dodgers player development system. It speaks to the players themselves for them wanting to get better. But as I had referenced before, guys who weren't even remotely close to being on the radar pitching in big league games, Ben Kasparius is certainly on that list. I think maybe the realistic expectations for him this year is to have a good season at AA. And he only spent about a month there, and then with us was great more often than not. Had his bumps with us at times, which is going to happen to anybody. But the thing that really stood out for me about Ben was he had a start in El Paso, couldn't make it out of the first inning. Next time out, Rose, if it was 6 innings for sure, it might have been 1 run or it was scoreless. So that showed me a lot about Ben Kasparis and his ability to put stuff behind. And the next thing you know, he's somehow starting a World Series game, which is pretty incredible for him and all that, and doing a good job. And I think I usually on social media during the games, these are non-Dodgers people who are like, this guy's stuff is really good. So obviously, it's who knows where he's going to end up ultimately this year. He's going to be in a big league uniform at some point this year. It just depends on when and how long it is and what the needs are going to be. But that's another guy who's probably going to get the full experience of being on the shuttle this year as things stand now, which again, it's a really tough thing to do. It
is. So Travis Barbary, he is going to a different role. Scott Hennessy, the mayor of Drillville, Oklahoma City's going to love this guy. He is just absolutely awesome. So talk about Travis and then bringing in Scott Hennessy as the manager.
Travis, I can't state what this guy means to the Dodgers organization. He's literally been his only employer since he's graduated from college, is briefly as a player and then as a coach. And Travis is really, in this day and age, probably the best person you want as a AAA manager, because he's been with the organization for so long. He knows what the priorities are going to be. By his own admission from his first year in 2019, he had to learn to kind of get to realize that, hey, you can't get mad when a certain player gets scratched or this or that. Right. The first person who doesn't like Travis, the next person I meet who doesn't like Travis will be the first. Just an outstanding human person. And, I've said it before, I just want to make it clear, this was 100% his decision. That he just felt like it was time to maybe be closer back to family. After doing it for a few years, being the AAA manager, the guys who, when we won our league championship in 2023, I think obviously they're happy to win, but they're also probably even more happy for Travis that he was the manager behind the team that won a championship there in 2023. So he's going to be missed. I have a very special relationship with him and had a chance to see him actually in November, right after the Dodgers won the World Series in South Carolina when I was out there. But Scott Hennessy, boy, the thing that is going to stick with me about Scott Hennessy is, we had that reveal event in October for the Comets, and, we had some conversations with the player development folks to maybe get some players there, but it just didn't work out. Just a lot of different things happening. But Will Rhymes, Vice President of Player Development, said, look, we've decided at this point Scott Hennessy is going to be the manager. We can see if he'd be willing to come. I knew he had fully moved to Tulsa after being there the last few years, and he said absolutely. But what you also need to realize is for games 1 and 2 of the World Series, everybody in player development got to go to LA for those games.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
He stuck to his commitment. He went to game 1, was there with his daughter for the Freddie Freeman walk-off grand slam, and then flew back the next day to be there in Oklahoma City. I was blown away by that. He didn't have to do it. No one expected him to, but that showed how much that he wanted to be a part of it and be there. And that's the first time I'm also meeting him as well. Yeah. So to do that, also what I've learned is his wife does dressage, works with horses. They own a horse. So that's partly why they lived in Tulsa, because they have a horse. So now they've fully moved to Oklahoma City as well.
Nice.
Basically, shortly after the World Series is when they made the move. Since then, he came to our office holiday party. He is really an avid pickleball player. He's plays with a couple of guys in our sales department all the time. So it is I've figured out very quickly why he was so beloved in Tulsa.
Yep. Yeah.
And just hearing him, with the time I've spent with him, the different stories he tells and all that stuff. And you see why the players love him so much. You know, I always think about that video of Gavin Lux getting pulled from the All-Star game in 2019 and Scott Hennessy telling him he's going to AAA, and you could just see the genuine love there. And I'm looking forward to having him here in Oklahoma City. I know, and it's funny because I've had people, Tulsa baseball fans throughout the years, more than one person literally tell me, like, we understand we're going to lose our players to you. We don't want to lose our manager to you, which you never hear.
Yeah, right.
But again, it's become pretty clear to me why. I know he's already been out in Arizona for a little bit now doing fantasy camp. Then they're going to have a development camp, and there's going to be spring training. So he's already out there. I know he's really excited, ready to go. I'm excited about the coaching staff overall, which I can't speak to a whole lot yet. It hasn't become public, but I'm excited about it. And again, we're certainly ready to have Henny here in Oklahoma City. He's already done so much that most people don't do. So it should be a fun year with him.
So the Dodgers have won 2 World Series championships in the last 5 seasons played. Of course, 2020 was a shortened season. So how does the AAA affiliate Oklahoma City take advantage of that, parlay that into maybe some extra excitement at the AAA level? What are your promotions? Where can people find merchandise? Where can they get tickets? What are your plans for your tickets and all that?
Well, I think from a baseball standpoint, we talked about so many different guys and the impact they've eventually had on the big leagues. And now, though, in those 2 World Series of the last 5, it's been over 50% of that roster are former Oklahoma City players, guys who come through here and end up having an impact, for World Series winning teams. So that's the big thing, is that you're going to see some really good baseball players to begin with. We just announced our promo schedule for the 2025 season, which sounds really weird to say. But yeah, you can find all that information on our website, okcomets.com. Group tickets, ticket packages are available. We're also doing a new flex plan this year, where you get to choose your games in certain increments. Before, like, even if it was small as the 7-game packages, those dates were kind of picked ahead of time. You could exchange your tickets at a later date, but those were kind of the set dates that you had ahead of time. But now it's given more kind of power to the ticket buying public. Single game tickets will go on sale on February 18th. So again, the best place to get more information is our website, okcomets.com. You can prefer to speak to someone on the phone. We'll be happy to talk to you, 405-218-1000. So it's getting close. I believe it's in 2 days, Tuesday, 2 months from Tuesday, first game. We open on the road in Sugar Land this year. Home opener will be on April the 1st in Oklahoma City against El Paso. We've got all our regular weekly promotions coming back this year with the $2 Tuesdays, the Fireworks Fridays, the Family Sundays. So it's going to be a fun year, as it always is, and we're looking forward to people coming out to support the team. First year is the Oklahoma City Comets.
Yeah. I'll bet you can remember the day that they clicked publish on that website to change it from baseball club to Comets, can't you?
I don't know the exact date. I should, but it coincided with Game 2 of the World Series.
Oh, yeah, it did.
I can tell you that, yeah.
Alex Freeman, Director of Broadcast Communication, does a little bit of everything for AAA Oklahoma City. Hey, I've taken a lot of your time. This has been, it always is, just a wonderful honor to get to speak with you again. Thank you so much again for your wonderful hospitality and allowing me to come to Oklahoma City and cover those games. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, how big of an honor it is. So thank you so much, Alex Freedman.
Oh, well, thank you, Casey. Always great to talk and catch up with you as well. And we always love seeing you at the ballpark, and I know a lot of the guys appreciate all the work you do too.